everyone. Thank you for tuning to Wide Eyes, a podcast made to uplift and educate others about the Asian American community. My name is Katie.
And this is Anou. Happy AANHPI Heritage Month. For those of you that don't know, May was chosen to celebrate AANHPI Heritage Month to commemorate not only the first arrival of the Japanese to the United States on May 7th of 1843, but also the completion of the Transcontinental Railroad by Chinese immigrants on May 10th, 1869. And so AANHPI, what does that stand for? AA is Asian Americans, NH is Native Hawaiians, and PI is Pacific Islanders. And so, like I said, the month of May was just chosen to celebrate our wonderful heritage as Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders. And yeah, so Katie and I were going to go ahead and... Oh, wait, actually, before that...
You forgot something?
Yeah, I did forget something. Okay, our intro sounded a little weird, didn't it, Katie?
It did.
Yeah, and why does it sound weird, Katie?
Because New is not here. She's out doing her thing, being a boss.
Yes, New is girl bossing, and so she won't be able to join us this month. I think by the time the video or the episode comes out, New would have already graduated, and so we're recording this right now during her finals, graduation, and so New was just like, you know what? I'm burnt out. I need to just relax. And we're like, okay, girl, you do that. You relax. You need to relax. But I think Katie and I still thought it was important to have this discussion just because May only comes once a year, right? We just wanted to discuss and talk more about AANHPI Heritage Month. So New, congratulations. Finals, you passed. And yeah, we're so happy for you.
Yeah, I'm like, oh my God, we should send her a message.
You go first. You go first.
New to my soulmate, my yin to the yang, my everything. I am so proud of you. And by the time you hear this, I know you're already, walked that stage and we will be there with you. Me and New's going to come see you. But anyway, I just want to say I'm so proud of you and I can't wait to see what you do next. And whatever you do, I will be with you every step of the way.
Likewise, I'm very proud of you. I am so glad that the universe and the stars align to have us not only do this on our professional journey, but for us to grow closer personally too in our personal lives. I'm just so happy you're literally the sun child, like your Hmong name. You're literally the sun to my world. And I honestly do mean that because I know if I ever have anything, you're always there to support me and you're always my hype girl. You and Katie are my hype girl, but I know you take it to another level. I know you take it to the next level, and I really appreciate having you in my life. And so, yes, congratulations. Katie and I are going to be yelling in the stands for you, and Korea's going to only have you for a year, and then you're going to come back because I need you. I need you to come back to the States.
You might not come back.
I need you both to come back to the States. But yes, we're so proud of you, New, and life after undergrad sucks. Welcome to the real world. All right. And so with that said, for this month, we, did some research on our end, and we stumbled across this website called We Are More. It's an art series that celebrates the resilience and range of Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders, and they seek to break down tired, worn-out cliches and stereotypes of Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders, and forged in it is a set of brilliance, multidimensional identity that encompasses the resilience and range of our people. Featuring dynamic visuals, bold typography, and human stories, this art series will make you rethink how you see America's fastest growing racial minority for the good. And so within the We Are More art series, they have this section called Hold the Space for AAPI Conversations. And basically what it's doing is it's pulling questions from the We Are More campaign designed to facilitate discussions and exploration of Asian and Pacific Islanders experience. And they do this by having prompts and then discussion topics within the prompts, in addition to further reading that you can dive into. And so it's a great way to explore topics and have conversations about AAPI issues. Just want to give them a shout out, more than art. If y'all are interested as educators, or if you're doing a workshop series that you want to have discussions about AAPI topics, more than art is a great way for you guys to do this. And so basically what Katie and I did was we took they had a lot of questions, I think maybe more than 15, around 20-ish. But Katie and I picked our top 2 favorite discussion topic. And then we're changing it up a little bit where we're going to mainly focus on the discussion topic or the prompt. But the prompt, so there's a prompt And we realized that for some of the prompts, we took it differently than what they intended it to be. And we thought that was really unique, and just like how different Asian Americans, they perceive this particular prompt. And so Katie and I were gonna provide both the prompt and the discussion topics as like kind of like a little background, but then we're just going to focus mainly on how we interpreted the question. Katie, if you want to just kind of talk about like if you did take it the same way as the discussion topics intended to, or if we kind of just like, oh, I completely thought of this, which is completely different from what they intended it to. Maybe we can just talk a little bit about that and then just dive into whatever the question that we chose. All right, Katie, you want to go up with your question first?
Starting off with the first question that like stuck out to me, it's someday we will speak without hesitation. And the topic or prompt that came with it was a community learning to advocate for itself. For me, I took it, I think literally what the question said too, but in my own perspective. So I think working for me, right? Like, and Anu and New know this, but working in the education system and working with primarily like kids that are elementary students, like I feel like really my perspective has changed a lot. And this applied to me too, because when I was a student, right, I wasn't one to like speak up a lot. I was the type to just like, okay, go to school, listen to your teacher, do what you're supposed to do, listen to your teacher, right? Pay attention, be respectful, all those things that our parents taught us, and even at school, right? I go by the book, basically listen to them, right? But like I always thought that I was the shy kid. Like I just thought that that's who I am, and maybe that's who I will always be, right? Like I thought that's just ingrained in me, like it's a personality trait, right? And where I'm going with this is that, as I like grow older, I realized maybe it's not a personality trait, maybe it's something that within myself where it's hard for me just to speak up, because sometimes I feel like for me, I am mistaken like being shy to being not able to speak up, because I feel like both of them can mean differently for people. And I realized that in a lot of for me in my culture, and I feel like Anu can relate this to in our culture, I feel like our families, I know my parents, they didn't really like talk to me about being like stand up for myself or like really just speak up. And I feel like our culture is really like, oh, if there's an elder, right, you have to listen to what they say, you have to obey, right? You have since you're younger and less wiser, you listen to the older one because they're more experienced, they have more to say, right? So that's how I took it. And going back to working in the education system, I realized that a majority of the kids I teach are Asian, primarily Hmong. And the reason why they're put in the class that I teach is because their English, their literacy level is low. So basically at home, whatever, they're not getting the learning academic that they're supposed to get at home, and at school too, it's not clicking with them. And I realized that a lot of them don't speak up. Like a lot of the Asian kids that I have, they don't really speak up, or they don't ask for help. Like if they're struggling, they're just like looking at their papers, or they're just looking at me, and they don't even ask their partners for help or me. And I kind of put myself in this situation when I was younger, where like it kind of makes sense because I was like that too. So I feel like till this day, I'm still learning to advocate for myself. And I feel like it's harder being done than said, right? But I feel like with me having younger siblings, it's easier for me to speak up, because since I didn't have that, like, now that I'm more educated on it, I could speak up for my younger siblings. And day by day, like I'm learning how to advocate not just for my siblings, but for myself, because I feel like for me, it's easy for me to advocate for others, but not for myself, because growing up, I didn't learn how to advocate for myself. I only learned how to do for others, right? So that stuck with me. And, that's something that I still struggle to this day. But by putting myself in these kind of position where teaching at an educational or at a school, it taught me to advocate for myself as well. How about you, Anu? Do you have any like experience or whatever like to share about this topic?
I related a lot to you when you said growing up, you can't talk back to elders. And that's kind of like how I interpreted this question. Someday we will be able to speak without hesitation. I immediately had flashbacks to like, oh, like, they're older than you. Like you have to respect your elders, and you have to respect their opinions. And I just felt like I had no space to voice my opinions, because as a kid, like, of course, you're just surrounded by people who are older than you, right? Unless you have siblings. And even then, it's just like you always gonna just do fights with your siblings. So you're not really having like an intellectual conversation with siblings growing up. For the longest time, I remember like being instilled in me, like, respect your elders and never talk back to them. And then you bringing this prompt into like today's day and age, like with today's climate of like cancel culture, where you're literally walking on eggshells because you don't want to offend people. And I think, I don't know, I feel like okay, so I feel like growing up, it was really hard to voice your opinions and what you think. Keep in mind, you have to respect everyone. And I feel like even now to this day, I still believe in like, the more like Asian traditional, not tradition, I wouldn't say traditional values. I think it's just a value upheld within like every different type of culture, but I still do think that you should definitely respect your elders because they have lived experience. Like as I'm getting older, I'm just kind of like, oh, my parents were right when I was younger. Like I think about all these different things. I was like, I still do think that elders, they have a different viewpoint from you because they have lived experiences. But I think we need to learn, at least I need to learn how to draw the line and my boundaries. If they're not respecting me, then I really don't have to listen to what they have to say, because my own personal opinion is just like, if you're not going to respect my opinion, why should I respect your opinion? And so for me, I feel like I'm a really open person. I love controversy, guys, and I love talking to people with different opinions than me. But I think once it gets to that line of like them being rude to you or them being like disrespectful of your ideas, then I'm just gonna like, okay, we're not gonna have we can't have a civil conversation, and then we just don't need to have conversation at all. And so I think growing up now, it's like learning how to speak your opinions within your culture without hesitation, but then you bring it out to this social climate that we're in with cancel culture, but not trying to offend anyone. I think now, especially with like AAPI hate, what came to my mind was Simu, who's a very prominent actor right now in Hollywood, playing Shang-Chi and whatnot. I knew him first from Just Kidding News, and then Kim's Convenience, and then to the superstar that he is today. But there was one, I think he was at a basketball game, and then at these games they always do like celebrity lookalikes, and then like the celebrity lookalike was like that they showed for Simu was like the complete opposite of, like, literally the complete opposite of how he looks like. And I think when Simu voiced his opinion like, oh, like, you guys could have found a different Asian to do that, like I feel like now it's not that we're speaking up without hesitation. It's just like I feel like now in our political climate, it's just like we have to say something, and I don't think that's always the answer. I don't know where I'm going with this, but I feel like now it's just like we're speaking too much, and then we're not taking the opportunity to reflect back about like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have said this, or
Ooh, I have something to add after that.
yeah, you're good.
Yes.
Or maybe I shouldn't have jumped on this bandwagon. And I'm pulling back from Simu's experience just because I think that was like, because he's I forgot what the word is, but he's like the prominent Asian face. For me personally, like I love my boy Simu, but I think for that particular incident, like it's cool. The physical attributes were definitely not there, but then like it could have made that guy's day, the one where they like did the cam up there, like it could have made his day to be like, oh my god, yes, I do look like Simu. Oh my god, yes, I do feel represented. But now I feel like we're just in this space where we're just like really quick to call out people, really quick to like, oh, that's offensive, you offended me. And then there's just a whole opposite side of where you don't want to say anything because you don't want to offend anyone. But I think now it's just like to be able to speak without hesitation. I think we as Asian Americans have come from a long way, because I will say before, like we used to be stepped on and whatnot and just kind of like let people say whatever they want to say. But now I feel like we're just kind of overcompensating that. I don't know what I'm trying to say. I hope my message is trying to be conveyed, but it's really hard to put into words. But yeah, okay, anyways, that's what my take on this conversation was. But yeah, Katie, you said you had something to say, so did you want to go ahead and share it?
Yes, I think your message is being conveyed, because correct me if I'm wrong, because I think for me, like a personal like experience I can share is because I talked about this before, but my younger sister, she's diagnosed with autism, correct? And sometimes when I take her out, there are people like kind of like asking, how sometimes it can come off as offensive, correct? Like, oh, like why is she crying? How sometimes some people just give you looks, or
Yeah,
like
yeah.
they're questioning you, like, oh, why is she crying so much? Why can't she speak? Like she looks like she's old enough because she can speak at the age, like just those kind of questions.
Yeah.
And sometimes it could come off offensive, but then like I think because maybe me like educated and knowing my sister's situation, stuff like that, and sometimes people don't know at all. Like I think there are people who genuinely don't know. like what autism is. So I try to take it as a high road where like I don't let it offend me, but if they do, I would appreciate if for them, instead of like just talking behind my back or just saying in front of me, like kind of ask me like, oh hey, like I see that like she's doing that, or maybe she's not speaking, is there something going on? Like I appreciate when people come up to me and ask me questions like that, because I can educate them on what it is, right? What she have. So that's like my interpretation on it. But I get what you're saying, because sometimes people feel like it's offensive, right? To say it. But for me, I do appreciate it if someone come up to me and ask me those kind of questions. Like I won't get offended. I feel more even, I'm glad to help out. Like I'm glad to even educate you, like, and inform you of these kind of disabilities. And I think I kind of ingrained that into my siblings, because there are times when my younger siblings, I have two older brothers older than my sister. Sometimes they ask questions like, oh, why is she like that? Or like, why is there people in a wheelchair? Why they're doing sign language? And I always ask my siblings, hey, like, if you really want to know, sometimes, you can ask that person in a respectful manner. So I'm trying, for me, like, I feel like I'm trying to educate my younger siblings. Like there's like a fine line between it. Cause sometimes like you said, new, it could come off as offensive. Like some people will be like what, like you don't even know me, but you're asking me a question. But I feel like if people, I don't know, I think if people could just be a little bit more open-minded, and if they can educate others, I know it's not their job to do so, but for me, I appreciate when people ask me questions like that, because I take it as if, oh, you don't know, I can teach you. So that's my little take on it. I hope that makes sense.
No, that does. And now I'm adding to that conversation
Yeah.
just to validate you more, because
Yeah.
I've had experiences so basically I grew up with my cousin. He has cerebral palsy, and he's also deaf. He can't speak. And so I grew up with a person with disability. I just kind of thought it was like it was a normal thing. Like I'm a person who can communicate verbally. He's a person who can't communicate verbally to me. We're just a little different. That's it. And so that was my normal. So I always loved asking questions about like, oh, why is my cousin like, how come he can't speak? How come, he can't walk as fast as me? How come, X, Y, and Z? And so I personally never found it offensive to ask questions, because like growing up, I realized how important it is to like just educate people. And I remember, Katie, you telling the story of one of your little kitties, like who was paired with an individual with like during a classroom
Yeah.
activity. Yeah. And
Mhm.
that his partner had within that class activity had a disability, and he was really scared, right?
Yeah.
And so for me, like it was always normal, like, yeah, so what, this person has a little, like they're a little different from me, and so what? And so I've always like, I don't know, maybe I'm just a blunt person too, but whenever I feel like I see someone who's just like I'm not like where it's rude, like, going up to like, oh, what's wrong with you,
Of
but
course.
like
Yeah.
when I build that rapport with someone, like I personally find it very comfortable to ask, like, hey, like if you don't mind sharing, like, why do you have crutches? Or why are you in a wheelchair? Just because like I'm interested in learning
Yeah.
more, and like how can
Mhm.
I help you, right? Because
Yep.
growing up, I was always helping my cousin, like helping him get into the car, like helping him communicate, like helping him with whatever he may need. So for me personally, I think it's also like asking them to see if like I can help better accommodate you. I've encountered individuals with disabilities where they do want to get help, and they're really okay with like opening up about their disability. But then I've also encountered other individuals where like they want that independence, and they're like, I can do this myself, I don't need your help. Not from like a bad way, but just more of their personal independence. Some individuals are, not as open to opening up about their disabilities, which is completely okay. But I think it's just like I said, this political climate that we're in of not wanting to offend anyone, like but for me to like translating that back to this discussion of
Mhm.
speaking up without hesitation, like, yeah, ask me questions about my culture, ask me questions about my heritage. Like I would love to open up to you and have a conversation about like how I grew up, or why we do this, cook this dish this way, or why we do this. But yeah, so that's just my take on it. I think that was a really fruitful conversation for the first question. And so
Yeah, I think so
moving
too.
exactly right. And so moving on to the next question was the one I picked. Someday our history will be taught. And so this was a prompt, and the discussion topic was telling the story of API's and American history curriculum. And so for me personally, someday our history will be taught. Maybe it's just a pessimistic in me, but when I read this prompt, I was just like, why are we waiting to have them write about our history? I think it's really important, but I don't like that someday. Because I feel like that someday implies of like we're waiting for people to write about our history, but it's just like we don't need to wait for anyone. Like we need to start taking action, and we need to start making sure that our Asian American stories are written in history books, in America's history books. And the reason why I feel very passionately about this was because I didn't realize the importance of learning about Asian Americans until I took my first Asian American studies course, where we learned about like different communities. Because for me, like I didn't realize, like, because I'm Asian American, and so everything that I was around, I was surrounded by Asians. And so I was like, who needs to know more about me? Like I know about myself. But then you, or at least for me, like in reflecting about the first like Asians in our history books, literally the only thing I remembered was like 2 or 3 lines about the Chinese built the railroads, and that was it. You glossed over everything. And then I specifically remember going back to my mom, was just like, hey mom, like who are we? And this was around the time of General Ving Pao's when he was brought into court, and we were doing my first protest was for the General Ving Pao. I kind of asked my mom, was like, hey, like how do we get here to the States? Like what are we doing this for? Because for that protest, like, you know, a lot of Hmong Americans, they took their kids out of school to go protest. And so yeah, my mom was just explaining like, oh, you know, because of the secret war, this is how we came to the United States. And so as a little kid, I didn't really have to worry about Asians in history books, because whenever I had a question about my particular culture, like I just went to my parents and they told me like how we got here. But then it wasn't until college where I was just like, oh, we're like non-existent in history. Granted, it was a secret war, right? Hence the name. But in general, Asians American too, reflecting back on when I learned about Chinese, the significance of our Chinese people to the United States, like they built the railroads. That was it. Fun fact about Fresno, the Japanese internment camp was at the Fresno Fairground. That was really it. It was these one-liners, didn't dive into the conversation at all. Yeah, so I think it's really important to have Asians and Asian Americans history to be taught to the United States, because they don't realize the significance of how long we have been here. Wong Kim Ark, the reason why United States, if you're born in the United States and you're considered a United States citizen, is because of Wong Kim Ark. And so and I think it was too DACA, one of the first students of why DACA was a thing, and it's really prominent. Did y'all know that DACA was actually because of an Asian student? I think it was it Chinese or Korean? It was a Korean exchange student who wanted to study in the United States, but they couldn't. And so hence they fought for DACA, right? But now it's, and then going back to the Cesar Chavez and the whole, I forgot what the name of it was, but Cesar Chavez and fighting for farmers' rights. It was Larry Italong, Filipino-American farmer, who they were the forefront of it. And then once Cesar Chavez and came in, and it's just like, now it's just kind of like Asian Americans we've started a lot of these, like we were the initiators for these topics and these big changes, but our names aren't recognized, and I think it should be, because, you know, people just kind of like, oh, Asians, what are y'all doing over here in Fresno? Like, but we've been here for a hot minute. And so yeah, I think that's just my little take on it. I think it's important to have the stories of APIs and American history curriculum, just so that they're aware that, you know, we've been here for a hot minute, Japanese Americans, like 3, 4, 5th generations, and we've made huge contributions to the United States. And it's about time we get recognized, not just from like a, you know, y'all need to recognize us for all of the stuff that we did, but it's just kind of like I still feel like we're outsiders, and it's like we're not outsiders. But yeah, Katie, did you have a take on this?
Yeah, like honestly, I didn't thought much until you spoke your piece, but earlier you mentioned something about like, you know, within yourself that you're Asian American and stuff like that. And like I thought about it too, where like when growing up, since I was fortunate enough to be raised by my grandparents, so they're very traditional, and they taught me like, you know, being prideful in who I am. And the area that I grew up from was predominantly Asian and Hispanics, and a lot of my friends, well, at the time they were all Asians, so I was grateful to be surrounded with, in a way, my community, right? So growing up, I thought I knew who I was. Like I was like set. Like I'm like, oh, okay, I'm Hmong, I'm an Asian American, like whatnot, right? Like I know myself pretty well, but like you said earlier, like as I got to college and just getting to learn more about Asian American studies, I realized like, wow, like there's so much more for me to learn. Like I thought I knew myself, but no, clearly not. Like there's so much more that I could learn and discover. And like you and you said, like even though for me, even now, like even though I know myself well or I know who I am, but like you said, like I think there's much more to do, right? And to give credit to pay homage to our people. And I see that because I even now, like I feel like the new generations, I don't think they know that. Well, I'm speaking it on my experience with my younger siblings because I don't think they know like whatsoever what the Secret War was. Like I don't even know if they know where we came from. And for me, I try to educate them the best I can, but like you mentioned, it's you know, I don't know. I'm jumbling all over the places, but I like you said, it is important to pay homage and give credit to where it deserved to be, not because of all the contributions and effort we made, but just looking through the history of how far we came along too. Like just I feel like the Hmong people, we came a long way, honestly. So I I wish we as the our generation, I wish we could, I hope we continue to carry this and pass over to the newer generation because nowadays, I don't know, like I'm not trying to be pessimistic here, but being in the education world too and just seeing how kids are these days, it can be cruel. Well, they can be cruel. So yeah, that's my little take on it. So another question that caught my attention while we were going through the website was the prompt is someday we will be welcome, not just included. And then the prompt that came with it is interracial friendships are still rare in America. And I took it in a way literally, but not to. Like I kind of took a spin on it, my perspective, because in previous episodes, I did mention how like growing up, I didn't have a lot of interracial friendships. Like all of my friends are Hmong. Well, we're Hmong and are still Hmong in a way, but now like I have more interracial friendships because when I transferred to a different high school during my sophomore year, that's when I started to expose myself to a lot of like new things that I didn't even know that exist. Like I was like, wow, like it was like a wow moment for me, right? So this question, I took it as like someday we will be welcome, not just included. Like a lot of the times, honestly, if I were to be really real, like I feel like I only existed if I had like Asian friends. Like I feel like I was only known if I had Asian friends. Like, like one of those people who like having a lot, I have like a lot of Asian friends when I was, I want to say elementary all the way up to my freshman year of college. So I only hung out with them because not only because I feel like I was known, right, by having a lot of Asian, but I think it's because I share a lot of commonalities with them, a lot of common interests, same thing like that too. But there are still some things that I feel like, oh, it's missing. Like a big part of it is that I feel like, honestly, I wanted to break away from I want to say, the label, right? Like, I don't want to be just known for that. But a part of me, oh man, I'm like, so conflicted because a part of me is like I wanted to stay because that's how I'm being known as. Like people will know me because I'm a part of the Asian group. But part of me was all like, I want to break away from this. Like I want something new. I want something different. Like I think I'm ready to take a risk because at that time I was really like, I don't want to take a risk. I was comfortable. I wanted to stay in my comfort zone, right? Like I didn't want to do anything different. I like the people I'm with and I feel like I'm okay being like that, right? But then like there was like something calling within me saying that Katie, like you could do so much more. Like there's so not to say that the friend group I was with didn't have their own thing going on too, but like I just felt that I could do so much more, right? By figuring myself out and going out there seeing what I can do. So I take this question as like me, like when I was included in my Asian group, I feel like I was being welcome and included, right? But in a way, part of me was like, you know, I feel like there's so much more I can do without being a part of an Asian group, right? Like, I don't need to be known for this. Like, I could do so much more. I hope this all makes sense. I know, do this even make sense?
Yeah, it is. It's just like trying to create your identity outside of being
Yeah,
like that Asian group.
exactly. Like, I feel like in a way where, like, because this question, what I took it as, if it's like saying someday we will be welcome, not just included, but in that Asian group, I did feel included. Like, I feel welcome and included. But then a part of me was, there's so much more I can do, right? Like Anu said, like finding my own identity outside of that, taking a risk and just figuring myself out, right? Like creating a new box for myself. Like I didn't have to put myself in that normal box. I could take a risk and put myself out of a different box and expose myself to different things. And now like I'm very grateful for doing that, because looking back, I feel like if I didn't do that, honestly, I would still be in that box, and I think I will still be in a way where naive, you can say, like not exposed to many things, and not so open-minded, right? So I'm thankful for taking that initiative and steps, just putting myself in a different box. How about you, Anu?
I'm happy that you took that initiative, girl. But yeah, so how I interpreted this question was I immediately drew to like media. Someday we will welcome, not just include. Like I drew to media of like having all of these roles, like, oh, Simu, first Asian man, Aquafina, this, that, like them putting us, just including us because that's like it's pandering and it's what's hot right now. But it's just like, so what? Like, so what if we're like the first Asian, like we have, or not so what, but like, I guess what I'm trying to say is like, oh, Crazy Rich Asians is a good one. Obviously, it was the first film since Joy Luck Club to feature like an all Asian American cast, but like I really draw to that of there's definitely problems with that movie, but I really draw to the idea of like this is just a rom-com and it just so happened to have Asian Americans as all. That's what I would like to see in the future of, not necessarily having us like bringing in like, one or two token Asian into these roles that like probably wasn't like meant for them, but just including them in there because it's what's hot right now to have Asian Americans. And I draw back to the token Asian, like when I think of like Greek life in like college of like these sororities and fraternities, maybe not so fraternities, I see this more in sororities where it's like all white individuals and like there's that one token Asian of them just being like to say like, oh, we're diverse. And then looking into the discussion topics of interracial friendships are still rare in America, I personally didn't see that because like you, Katie, like, growing up in Asian and Hispanic, I grew up with Hispanics and Blacks. And then we were the minorities. And so I never really grew up, with like I grew up with interracial friendships up until like middle school. I think middle school were definitely years where like race identities started to form. But for the most part, like most of us were chill. Like there was no animosity between the different ethnicities. It was just kind of like chill, And I think that's why I definitely valued the schools that I grew up in. Because I have definitely so Fresno is really diverse, but then once you go to Clovis, I'm sorry, Clovis, y'all need a lot of work still. But it was like a lot of white kids. And so
Yes.
right, exactly. So I went to a kind of like a high school program, but I interacted with students from Clovis Unified, and they were definitely they weren't as exposed to other communities of color. You can definitely see like, I don't know how to word this, but you can definitely see like they've never interacted with people of color and it shows. But for me, like that's why I'm very thankful of growing up in a community where it's very diverse because it's just like, yes, your skin color is a little different from me, your food is a little different from mine. Like, so what? Is more food to explore and more to learn about. But I think in general too, going back to the discussion topic of, I think it is still rare in America just because everything is so secluded, especially with Asian Americans. Like you go to we're literally on the East Coast and the West Coast, and like that's the bulk of where Asians are. Like if you go to like Georgia or something like that, like we're not existent there. And so yeah, I still think for the bulk of America, interracial friendships are still a little rare. I'm thankful to have grown up in a community where I was able to experience interracial relationships. But yeah. Katie, do you have anything else to add? If not, then I'll just move on to the next one.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, for some of us, or like for some of those who maybe are not fortunate or don't have that kind of environment growing up, like being around interracial or other minorities or people of color. I don't know. For me, I didn't have that either. Well, I like I say, I was predominantly surrounded by Asians and Hispanics, but I stuck with a lot of like Asian people, right? But I realized within myself, like when I was a freshman, that, oh, like there's so much more to see, right? I learned that, like, I want to say it was like early age too. I want to say like being a ninth grader, I was like, oh, there's so much more that I can do. So I took that initiative, and I know that, maybe some of you don't see that yet, but like when you do see it, I want to say just tap into it, see what you can do outside of that.
Thank you so much for sharing, Katie. And so moving on to our last and final question. The prompt is someday we will be American. And then the discussion topic was the importance of citizenship to the API community. This is definitely important to citizenship for the API community because there's a lot of undocumented Asian Americans in the United States, and that's not known. I think when you think of like undocumented individuals, you think of like the Hispanic community, but there is a lot of undocumented Asian Americans in the United States. How I interpreted this question was, we will never be Americans. And that is a statement that I wholeheartedly believe in. Because, and it's very unfortunate, but because of the color of my hair, the features of my face. And the reason why I think of it this way was because I remember very vividly this conversation that I had with my dad, or just with my parents. And I've shared about this before too, I think, in our anti-Asian racism episode. But and this was, obviously pre-Anou, who didn't take Asian American studies. What was going on, just to paint a picture, was, a lot of Hmong individuals were just fighting for like recognition for like Hmong Day, or just like, we're the Hmong people, we've been here for 40, 50 years. And like, we need the recognition, right? And so for me, I kept telling my mom, I was just like, I don't know, this is so freaking stupid, right? Like, if America's not going to recognize us, like, what's the importance of fighting for all of this, right? Like, just drop it. It's not that important. And then my mom was like, no, it is important. We lost 30,000 of our people for America. That's basically like a huge chunk of our population, because we weren't a lot. There was not a lot to begin with. And 30,000 is just an estimated. That's not taken into the casualty of like who we lost in the jungle, who we lost in the Mekong River. And so when my mom said that, I was just like, huh. Like, it made me kind of rethink of like, oh, maybe I've been looking at this the wrong way. And then my dad has said, like, it is important for us to be recognized, but it doesn't, he came at it a way of like, it's not gonna truly matter in the United States, because we will never be American because of the color of our skin, because of our Black hair. And his way of saying with this is just like, yeah, you can have the government recognize you all you want, but then the people are not going to recognize you. Like, you go out of Fresno, you go out of California, you go out of Minnesota, North Carolina, like, we're non-existent. To the mass majority of the United States, we're just going to be ching chongs. We're still going to be Chinese. And so I think, and I don't want to sound like this is so gloomy, but for me, when I read Someday We Will Be American, it was just like this harsh reality of, I know that I'm American, and I know that I'm important to the like, I know my significance to the people, but it's just, unfortunately, at this point in time, like, the mass majority of the United States is not going to recognize that. They're not going to understand the importance of that. And that isn't to say like, we should just stop fighting to let people know who we are. We need to keep fighting for people to know who we are, because going back to like, the other question, like, we need to be recognized for the contributions that we made to the United States, because we were basically like sacrificial lambs, and what's been wrong needs to be right. Yeah, anyways, it's a sad reality where, to the mass majority, we will not be seen as Americans. But as long as you as an individual know how important it is, how important you are, and why, you need to take up space, by all means, take up that space. And by all means, you need to know why you are important. Because if you don't realize your significance, your identity, at least my identity was kind of like, who am I? But it's really important to know your identity as Asian, and to be proud of that. But yeah, All right, Katie, I kind of just went all over the place, but what are your thoughts on this?
My thoughts are exactly like yours. Like it aligns with yours, where like I feel like as long as you know that you're American or however you identify yourself as, then you should stick with that. But I get where you come from, where I understand the part where like, sometimes I do feel like what's there to be proof of? Like, why do I have to keep proving to others that I'm American when I know I am American, even though my skin color or my hair color or my eye color may not look like what you may think America looks like, but I feel like there's not really a right thing. Like, there's not really a book that say, oh, American looks like this. I don't want to say I don't believe it, but I'm kind of like, I know who I am. I stick to true to myself. And as long as I know that, then I am fine. Like, don't let other people's actions or words affect me, right? That's my take on it. And, I never had like an experience of proving myself to be American because I don't think I have that. Like I said, like I never went through that before or an experience or encountered that before. But there are times when I do feel like, going to like earlier, Anu mentioned about like the Clovis size. Sometimes I feel like I have to prove myself that I have to be American. Like, like they're not even doing anything to me, but there's that like what is that word? I don't know, is it innately something within me? Like I feel like I have to prove myself when I don't really need to prove myself. So it all comes to just knowing yourself.
Yes, thank you so much for sharing, Katie.
Yes.
To add on to that,
Yeah.
no, we're good.
You
We're
know what I
good.
mean?
I
You know what I
yeah.
mean?
I think I said my piece already.
I said my piece
Um,
too. But I was gonna take a little kind of spin on it. Do you ever feel sometimes like I was gonna say someday we will be Asian? Do you ever feel like that? You know what I mean?
oh,
Because sometimes honestly, like, okay, I'm really gonna share my feelings about that.
oh yeah, for sure.
Like I sometimes feel like, I don't know. Like for me, sometimes I feel like I'm not Asian enough, just like how I feel like I had to prove myself being American and then I had to prove myself being Asian. So I feel like there's sometimes I'm like walking within those two identities, or I don't want to say identity in a way too, but like circles where like I'm constantly trying to like find myself and be like, I know I'm Asian American, but sometimes I kind of feel like I have to be something more than the other. Like I'm trying to find like a balance in between, like, oh, I am both. Because I feel like in the Asian culture, right? Sometimes, I don't know how you feel new, but sometimes I feel like when I'm surrounded with other Asians, I feel like I'm the minority. Like you're the minority on top of minority already. And like, do you know what I mean? Like sometimes when I go
Yeah,
to San Fran or LA, I kind of feel like that.
I know
Yeah.
exactly what you mean.
Yeah, you know what I mean? So sometimes I feel like I have to prove to them that I'm Asian, to in a way. And within my culture too, because we spoke about like someday we will speak like without hesitation, like we don't like especially elders, right? Or the people who are older than us, we don't speak rude to them, right? We listen, we obey. So sometimes I feel like if I don't do I feel like physically I am Asian, right? But like thought wise, like the way I think, the way my process thinking, right? My perspectives on life and me just being open-minded, I feel like it's completely different from how an Asian person should be like. So that's my little take on it.
At first, I was like, "Oh, this is thought provoking," but then I was just,
Yeah.
as you were talking, I was just like, "I think it's okay that we don't have to prove ourselves as Asians,"
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's where Asian Americans come from.
Yeah.
Um, because we are Asian American. There
Mm-hmm.
is this divide, and I think it's really, maybe it's just more prevalent with us as Hmong
Mm-hmm.
Americans since we don't have a
Yeah.
homeland.
Yes.
So there's this always this like we really have no real identity of
Yeah.
just who Hmong are. Like when I think of like Hmong Lao and Hmong Thai, they're
Yeah.
very different. Their lived
Yeah.
experiences are very different. And
Mhm.
then you talk about like Hmong like in French and then Hmong in the United States,
Yeah.
very, very different experiences.
Mhm.
And so it is that divide of like Hmong American and the kind of like Asian Americans too. And like,
Yeah.
even for those individuals who have a country, right? Like
Uh-huh. Yeah.
I've had a lot of Asian friends who are like when I went back to Japan, they're just kind of
Yeah.
like, oh, like this little American kid, they don't know what they're doing. Like, but it's like I think it's okay because we I don't know how don't know. I don't know how to say this because we did grow up differently, like, with like Western values. So we definitely grew up differently. I agree with you. Like sometimes it's just like I feel like I'm not Asian enough. I feel like I'm too influenced by the West. But then again, it's just kind of like I think it's okay. Hence Asian American, right? Because
Yes.
there's that American in us. And I think it's okay to be proud to be an American. Because our parents came to the United States to fight for our freedom and to fight for better opportunities to better ourselves. And do I think there's a lot of opportunities in the United States? Maybe we can talk about that in another episode, because this it's just the cultural assimilation. And I feel like I don't know where I'm going with this, but I understand you where you're like, oh, I need to be more Asian. Oh, but I can't be too Asian because then I'm gonna be seen as too Asian, so I'm not gonna be American enough. But then if I'm not American enough, then like all of these stuff that I think is a very great opportunity for us to dive into the next episode. So I think this topic of what does it mean to be like, what does it really mean to be Asian American? I think this would be a great topic for a future episode. But with that said, I think this was a very fruitful conversation, and I highly encourage y'all, if you guys are interested in reading more about the other different prompts that the We Are More art series has on their website, by all means, definitely check that out. I think this is a great way to start a conversation within, just between friends, within your community, or maybe even in a bigger setting, like in a classroom, or if you're interested, like maybe even, I don't know, conference or something. I don't know. But if you're just interested in having these conversations, by all means, check it out. It's more than .art. Once again, it's more than .art. We are not sponsored. Why does this sound like a sponsorship? But yes, anyways, this wraps up the conversation for the month of May. We can't wait to chat with you all in the next episode. Feel free to check us out on Instagram at Wide Eyes Podcast.